The dauntless Horizon drifted silently through the blackness of space, its crew focused on the routine of deep space exploration. Captain Alina Foster stood on the bridge, gazing at the stars through the viewport. It had been weeks since their last communication with Earth, and the quiet isolation was beginning to weigh on her. The ship was on a standard mission, mapping uncharted sectors of the galaxy, gathering data, and following protocols. Yet the calm was shattered when a distress signal pierced through the static. It was faint at first, barely audible, but Alina's sharp ears caught the word "help" amidst the scrambled transmission. The signal was originating from the distant Garkath system, a planet inhabited by an alliance of alien species. The Garkath were known across the galaxy for their intelligence and advanced technology, but they were also known for their fragility. Their biology made them vulnerable in ways that most species couldn't understand. "Captain, you should hear this." Lieutenant Carter's voice broke through her thoughts, his eyes wide with urgency as he adjusted the controls. "It's coming from the Garkath homeworld. Sounds like they're under attack." Alina nodded, her mind already processing the possibilities. The Garkath were not a species to ask for help. Their pride and self-reliance had always kept them at arm's length from the other races of the galaxy. For them to send out a distress call was unheard of. Something had to be wrong, something serious. "Patch it through, Carter," Alina ordered. The speaker crackled, and then the voice of a Garkath officer filled the room. It was strained and desperate. "This is Commander Elric Kyle of the Garkath Alliance. Our systems are under siege. The Vraxis, they've invaded. Our fleets are overwhelmed. We request immediate assistance. Please, any ship that hears this message, we beg for help." The transmission cut out abruptly, leaving the crew in stunned silence. The Vraxis were a known threat, swarms of biomechanical creatures that consumed everything in their path. They had wiped out entire civilizations before. Alina felt a knot tighten in her stomach. The Garkath were no strangers to war, but they had never faced anything like the Vraxis. "Their ships are already in our sector," Carter reported, looking at the data on his console. "They're coming fast." Alina's decision was swift. She turned to her crew, her voice steady, but filled with determination. "Prepare for immediate jump. We're going to help the Garkath. They may not have asked for it, but they're getting it anyway. Set a course for the Garkath system. Full speed." The crew scrambled into action, knowing what needed to be done. Alina had been on enough missions to understand that when the galaxy's most advanced civilizations were in peril, it was often the ones least expected to come to the rescue who made the difference. She wasn't about to let the Garkath fall to an enemy they couldn't fight alone. As the dauntless Horizon leaked into faster-than-light travel, Alina's mind raced. They weren't the strongest fleet in the galaxy, but humans had something the Garkath didn't, an uncanny ability to adapt, to fight, to survive. Alina had no doubt the humans would find a way to save them, no matter. The dauntless Horizon emerged from faster-than-light travel with a sudden lurch, the cold vacuum of space greeting them with its usual silence. Ahead, the Garkath system lay in ruins. Several planets glowed with the unmistakable light of destruction, cities burning, debris floating in the orbits, and above it all, the soundless chaos of war. Captain Alina Foster stood at the bridge, her gaze fixed on the holographic display of the Garkath homeworld. The planet, once a vibrant hub of culture and advanced technology, now looked like a battlefield. The Garkath had always been known for their intelligence and technological mastery, but against the Vraxis, it seemed they were hopelessly outmatched. "We're receiving a communication from Commander Elric Kyle," Carter said, his voice tight with urgency. "He's ready to speak." Alina nodded. "Put it through." The image of a Garkath officer appeared on the display, a tall, angular alien with silver-blue skin and a long, expressionless face. His eyes, however, were filled with exhaustion and fear. "Captain Foster," Elric began, his voice strained. I did not expect help, but we are losing. Our fleets are scattered, and our cities are falling. The Vraxis, They do not fight like any enemy we've ever faced. Alina met Alric's gaze through the screen, trying to convey her determination. We're here now, Commander. We're going to help. You're not alone in this. Alric's eyes narrowed, skepticism still visible despite his exhaustion. You are Deathworlders, aren't you? You come from Earth, a planet known for its brutal survival instincts. But we've never needed your kind before. Why should we trust you? Alina stood firm. We don't expect trust. All we ask is the chance to fight with you. We may not have your advanced tech, but what we have is determination, and we're not going to stand by while your people are wiped out. There was a long pause, the weight of his decision hanging in the air. Finally, Ulrich gave a slight nod, a gesture that seemed almost reluctant but necessary. Very well. You may come to the surface. We will meet you in the capital. The connection ended, and the crew immediately began preparing for landing. Alina knew that this wasn't just about saving the Garkath. It was about proving humanity's worth. The Garkath had never believed humans had anything to offer in a fight, but now they had to see the truth. Humans were more than capable of surviving the odds, no matter how dire. The dauntless horizon descended through the smoke-filled atmosphere of the Garkath homeworld. Below, the capital city was barely recognizable. Parts of it were still standing, but many of its towers had crumbled, and fires burned uncontrollably in the streets. Alina's heart tightened. This wasn't just a mission anymore. It was a chance for humanity to show the galaxy that they weren't just survivors. They were warriors. As the ship touched down, the hatch opened, and Alina led her team out onto the broken streets. The Garkath were waiting for them, their faces a mixture of suspicion and fear, but also a quiet hope. The battle ahead would be tough, but Alina had faith in her crew. Together, they would fight. Together, they would win. The dauntless horizon was barely on the ground when the first wave of Raxus forces attacked. Alina Foster and her team had only just stepped onto the cracked streets of the Garkath capital when the sky above them erupted with explosions. The air was thick with smoke, and the sound of distant screams echoed through the ruined city. Captain, they're here, Carter's voice crackled over the comms. The Vraxis swarm. It's worse than we thought. Alina's eyes scanned the horizon. From the edge of the city, a dark cloud of biomechanical creatures descended. They were like a nightmare made real. Sleek, metal bodies with sharp, jagged edges, their glowing red eyes scanning the surroundings for targets. The swarm moved in perfect unison, a terrifying sign of their hive mind at work. We need to move. Now, Alina ordered. The humans and the Garkath forces scrambled into action, but it was clear that the Garkath, despite their advanced technology, were struggling. Their energy weapons fired, but the Vraxis seemed almost immune, their metallic exteriors deflecting the blasts effortlessly. The Garkath soldiers were quick, but their bodies couldn't withstand the kind of punishment the Vraxis dished out. It was a brutal, one-sided fight. Alina clenched her fists, her mind working at full speed. The humans had one advantage that the Garkath didn't: the ability to think outside the box. Garkath weapons rely on precision and energy, but they weren't built for unpredictability. Humans, on the other hand, were born in environments where everything was hostile and deadly. Earth's extreme conditions had shaped them into survivors, adaptable and relentless. Lieutenant Carter, I need something unconventional. Can you get us something that'll break their armor? Alina asked, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. Carter's eyes gleamed with determination. I've got an idea. Within minutes, Carter and his team had set up makeshift weapons, old Earth technology repurposed for this very moment. They started firing kinetic rounds, simple projectiles designed to cause maximum impact. The Vraxis swarm, so accustomed to energy-based attacks, were caught off guard. The human-made rounds slammed into their armor with devastating force, sending the creatures crashing to the ground. We've got them stunned, Carter yelled. Hit them now while they're down. The Garkath soldiers, seeing the human success, quickly adapted their strategy. They began using their own weaponry in conjunction with the humans' new methods, targeting the Vrax's weak points, where the kinetic rounds had left dents and cracks. It was a mix of human ingenuity and Garkath precision. But Alina knew this wasn't enough. The Vrax's swarm was too large, and their hive mind would adapt quickly. They needed to find the source, the heart of the Vrax's army, if they were going to win this fight. "We need to go to the source," Alina said, her voice cutting through the noise. "The Vrax's are being controlled from somewhere. Let's take the fight to their leader." She turned to Alric, who was watching the humans with a new understanding in his eyes. "Are you ready to lead your people into this battle?" Alric, now more trusting than ever, nodded. "We will fight with you. Wherever you lead, we follow." Together, the humans and the Garkath pressed on, adapting, improvising, and fighting with everything they had. The odds were still against them, but the Vraxis were starting to realize something. They had underestimated humanity, and that would be their biggest mistake. The battle raged on in the streets of the Garkath capital. Smoke filled the air, and the sound of gunfire and explosions echoed through the ruins. Alina Foster and her crew fought side by side with the Garkath, pushing back wave after wave of Vraxis. The humans had proven their worth with their unconventional tactics, but it was becoming clear that brute force alone wouldn't win this war. As the fight continued, Alina couldn't help but notice how the Garkath soldiers were beginning to change. At first, they had been reluctant to trust the humans, unsure of their ability to contribute to the defense of their world. But now, as they fought together, there was a growing sense of unity. The Garkath had always prided themselves on their intelligence and strategic thinking, but they were learning something new: how to fight with raw determination and adaptability. Alric Kael, the Garkath commander, was in the thick of it, his long, graceful body darting between cover as he fired his energy rifle at the approaching Vraxis. Alina had seen him hesitate in the beginning, his pride keeping him at a distance from the humans. But now, she saw him fighting with the same fierce determination she had seen in her own crew. She ducked behind a collapsed building, her pulse racing as the air around her shimmered with the heat of energy blasts. Carter, the ship's weapons officer, had rigged a makeshift grenade launcher using scrap materials, and it was proving surprisingly effective. But even that wasn't enough to stop the Vraxis entirely. The swarm was relentless, and they kept pushing forward, adapting to every tactic the humans and Garkath used. As Alina reloaded her rifle, she noticed Alric running toward a Garkath soldier who had collapsed under the weight of a fallen Vraxis. Without hesitation, Alric threw himself into the danger, lifting the soldier and pulling him to safety. Alina saw the look in his eyes, an unspoken bond forming between them. This wasn't just about tactics anymore. It was about more than winning the fight. It was about saving each other. "Stay with me, Alric," Alina said over the comms. "We're pushing forward. We need to keep the pressure on them. Can you get your people to move to the central plaza? We'll meet you there." Alric's voice crackled in her ear, calm but determined. "Understood. We're on our way." Alina looked around at her crew. They were all exhausted, but they were focused. Human soldiers had been working tirelessly, moving through the streets, clearing out Vraxis nests with improvised traps and guerrilla tactics. It wasn't pretty, but it was working. As they moved toward the central plaza, Alina found herself reflecting on the past few days. When they had first arrived, the Garkath had seen humans as nothing more than an unpredictable species from a dangerous world. But now, Alina could see that their respect for humanity was growing. They had seen the humans fight for them, sacrifice for them, and adapt to the horrors of war in ways they never thought possible. Alina's mind drifted back to the loss she had suffered in her past, a family lost to an enemy far worse than the Vraxis. She had made a promise that she would never let anyone face that kind of loss again if she could prevent it. Now, standing beside Alric and his soldiers, she realized something important. The fight against the Vraxis wasn't just about saving a world. It was about building something stronger. Trust. Unity. a bond forged in the heat of battle, one that could withstand anything the galaxy threw their way. The humans and Garketh had become something more than allies. They had become a team. And in the face of impossible odds, that was the most powerful weapon they had. The battle had reached a new level of intensity. The Vraxis were no longer just a swarm to be pushed back. They were a force to be reckoned with, learning from every move the humans and Garketh made. Alina knew that unless they changed their approach, victory would remain out of reach. The central plaza was a war zone, smoke swirling around the ruins of the once grand buildings. Every street, every corner seemed to be crawling with Vraxis. The swarm adapted quickly, and the strategies that had worked just hours before were no longer effective. The Garkath soldiers were struggling, their advanced weapons no longer doing enough damage to break through the Vraxis defenses. Alina's eyes scanned the battlefield, her mind racing. They couldn't afford to fight like this for much longer. If the humans and Garketh couldn't find a way to disrupt the Vraxis control, they would be overwhelmed. The idea of a central command was becoming clearer by the minute. There had to be a hive mind, a place where the swarm was being coordinated. If they could take that out, they might stand a chance. Alina, we've been tracking the Vraxis patterns, Carter said, his voice urgent. He stepped up beside her, showing her the latest data on his handheld device. It's all converging on a location deep in the nebula, just outside the system. There's a structure there. I think it's their hive core. Alina stared at the holographic display, her heart pounding. The core of the Vraxis swarm. This was their chance. Can we get a team there? She asked, already forming a plan in her head. Carter nodded. We can make the jump. It'll be risky. Getting through the nebula without being detected will take everything we've got. But it's our best shot. Alric, who had been listening, stepped forward. The Garkath commander looked tired but determined. We will go with you, he said firmly. The Garkath are with you, Captain. We won't sit back while our world burns. We'll help however we can. Alina nodded, a sense of gratitude flooding her. The Garkath had come a long way in a short time, from viewing humanity as a liability to seeing them as valuable allies. Now the bond between them was unspoken, a shared understanding forged in the fires of war. All right, Alina said, her voice calm and commanding. Carter, get the Dauntless Horizon ready for a jump. We need to reach that core before the Vraxis adapt to our tactics again. The crew moved quickly, their actions smooth and practiced. Alina could see the resolve in their eyes, the understanding that this mission was no longer just about defeating an enemy. It was about saving an entire civilization. As the Dauntless Horizon powered up, Alina felt the weight of the moment. The odds were slim. They would be entering hostile territory with little more than determination and whatever weapons they could scrounge together. But she knew this. The humans and Garketh had already proven they could fight together, and that was what gave her hope. The ship's engines roared to life, and with one final glance at the shattered world below, Alina gave the order. Prepare for jump. Let's finish this. As the stars stretched into lines of light, Alina could only hope that the Garketh would find the same strength in themselves that humanity had found in them. The battle for survival was far from over, but now they had a real chance to win. The dauntless horizon streaked through the dark expanse of the nebula, the vast clouds of gas and dust surrounding them like a veil of shadow. Alina stood at the helm, her eyes fixed on the swirling colors outside the viewport. The air was thick with tension. This was the most dangerous part of the mission. They were venturing into the heart of Vraxis territory, and the odds were slim that they would make it out without a fight. But they didn't have a choice. The fate of the Garkath homeworld rested on what happened next. Carter was at the controls, his fingers flying over the console. "We're in the nebula's gravity field now," he said, his voice steady despite the pressure. "There's a massive energy signal up ahead, right where the readings predicted. That's where their hive core is located." Alina's gaze shifted to the radar, which showed a cluster of ships moving toward them. The Vraxis weren't blind to their approach. They had likely detected the human ship's entry into the nebula, and the hunt was on. "Prepare for anything," Alina ordered. "We've got one shot at this." The ship's engines hummed, and the crew moved swiftly, each of them knowing their roles. The Garketh soldiers stood ready, their eyes scanning the screens, watching for any sign of enemy ships or hostile action. As they drew closer to the Hive Core's location, Alina could feel the tension in her bones. The swarm was near. The Vraxis, with their shared consciousness and unrelenting drive, were about to make their move. The crew had no idea how many ships the enemy had hidden within the nebula, but they knew that their only hope was to disrupt the hive mind controlling the swarm. "Carter, how long until we're in range of the core?" Alina asked. 5 minutes, Carter replied, his focus sharp. "We're going to have to fight through their ships to get there." A sudden alarm blared, and a moment later, the ship rocked as an explosion shook the hull. The Vraxis had found them. "Alina, they're coming in fast," Carter shouted. Alina gripped the armrest of her chair, her heart pounding in her chest. A swarm of Vraxis ships appeared out of the nebula's dense clouds, closing in on them with terrifying speed. The enemy ships were sleek and deadly, their sharp metal frames designed for both offense and defense. There were too many to count, all converging on the dauntless horizon. "Deploy shields, all weapons online," Alina ordered. The crew scrambled to respond, the hum of the ship's defense systems kicking in. The Vraxis ships closed in, their weapons blazing. Energy blasts slammed into the dauntless horizon, sending jolts of electricity through the ship. The lights flickered, but the shields held strong. For now. "We've got incoming fire from all sides," Carter shouted, his hands moving rapidly over the controls as he fought to maintain course. The ship shook with another explosion, but Alina's focus never wavered. She looked over to Alric, who had taken his place beside the human crew. He was calm, his alien eyes fixed on the monitors, directing his soldiers to assist wherever needed. "They're not getting through," Alric said, his voice low but filled with resolve. Alina nodded. She knew the battle would be hard, but they had no other choice. They had to fight their way to the core. As the dauntless horizon blasted forward, Alina gripped her seat and prepared for the fight of their lives. The battle wasn't just about survival, it was about proving that humanity, in its rawest form. The dauntless horizon sped through the nebula, dodging incoming blasts from the Vraxis ships. The ship's hull groaned under the pressure, but its shields held strong. Alina's knuckles were white as she gripped the armrests, her eyes locked on the view screen, watching the enemy swarm grow closer. "We need to push through, or we'll never reach the core," Carter called out, sweat beading on his forehead. "They're closing in fast. I can't keep this speed up much longer." The Vraxis ships were relentless, their glowing red eyes tracking the human ship's every move. It seemed like there was no way out, no escape from the swarm. Alina knew they had to act now, or they would be overwhelmed. "Alric, take the lead with your soldiers. We need to carve a path to that core," Alina commanded, her voice steadied despite the chaos. Alric nodded sharply. "Garketh forces, move forward," he shouted to his soldiers. "We fight with them, now." The Garketh soldiers, once hesitant to fight alongside the humans, now moved with the precision and teamwork that had earned them their reputation. With their sleek, energy-based weapons, they picked off the Vraxis ships one by one, allowing the dauntless horizon to push forward. But the enemy was too strong. The swarm continued to grow, new Vraxis ships emerging from the nebula's dark clouds, their weapons firing relentlessly. Alina's heart pounded as the ship jolted again, the hull groaning under the stress. They were running out of time. "Captain, we're going to need a miracle," Carter said, his voice tight. Alina glanced at the view screen. The energy signature of the hive core was growing brighter. They were getting closer, but so was the swarm. The core was the key to ending the Vraxis control, but if they couldn't get to it, all would be lost. Suddenly, The comms crackled to life. It was one of the Garkath soldiers. Their voice urgent. "Captain, we've located the core. It's in a massive structure just ahead. We can't get close without drawing more fire. We need to clear the area." Alina nodded. "Carter, can you fire a path through the swarm? We need to make an opening." "I can try," Carter said, his fingers flying over the controls. "But we're running low on energy. This will be our last shot." Alina took a deep breath. "Do it." The ship's weapons hummed to life, and with a blast that lit up the nebula like a star, the dauntless Horizon fired everything it had. Energy beams tore through the Vraxis swarm, cutting down their ships with deadly precision. But it was only a momentary opening. The swarm quickly closed in, and the dauntless Horizon had only seconds to make it through. "Hold on," Alina shouted as the ship shot forward, the powerful burst of energy propelling them through the gap in the swarm. The hull rattled as they sped toward the core's location, but Alina kept her eyes fixed on the goal. They were almost there. The Garkath forces fought valiantly alongside them, their weapons lighting up the darkness as they kept the Vraxis at bay. Alina could see the determination in their eyes, and for the first time, she felt a sense of unity between their two species. As they drew closer to the core, the shape of the massive Vraxis structure came into view. A dark, foreboding fortress surrounded by the swarm. It was the heart of their power. If they could destroy it, they could cripple the Vraxis. "Carter, get us in position. We need to make a direct hit." "We're there, Captain," Carter replied, his voice full of resolve. "We're in range." Alina's heart raced. This was it, the final push. They had to succeed. There was no turning back. "Fire," she commanded. The dauntless Horizon unleashed everything it had, sending a torrent of energy at the Vraxis core. The explosion lit up the nebula like a supernova, and Alina held her breath, praying it was enough. The explosion rocked the nebula, blinding light flashing through the darkness as the dauntless Horizon soared past the shockwave. Alina's hands tightened on the controls, her heart racing as she tried to regain her bearings. The ship's hull groaned under the strain, and for a moment, everything seemed to be a blur of flashing lights and distant sounds. Then, everything fell silent. The core was gone, but the fight wasn't over. Alina could still feel the presence of the Vraxis swarm, though weaker now, still circling like predators in search of their prey. The Vraxis had been crippled, but the damage to their forces wasn't enough to end the battle just yet. "Captain, the swarm is retreating," Carter reported, his voice relieved but cautious. "We've disrupted their control. Their ships are scattering, losing coordination." Alina let out a slow breath, her shoulders relaxing slightly. The victory was close, but she knew that one last push was needed to completely finish the Vraxis off. Their hive mind had been shattered, but they weren't going to give up without a fight. "All Garkath forces, regroup." Alric's voice came over the comms. "It is not over. We must drive them out of our system once and for all." The Garkath soldiers had been fighting nonstop, but now there was a glimmer of hope. They were starting to realize that the Vraxis, though still dangerous, were no longer an unstoppable force. Alina saw the determination in their eyes as they pressed forward, their weapons still firing with deadly precision. But then something unexpected happened. A new ship appeared on the radar. Larger than the others, its dark silhouette stood out in the fading light of the nebula. It was a Vraxis warship, its design sleek and terrifying. And it was heading straight for them. "This isn't over," Carter muttered, watching the ship's approach on his screen. "It's a command ship. Looks like their leader's making a last-ditch effort to reclaim control." "Not if I can help it," Alina said, voice tight with determination. She turned to her crew. "We're not letting them regroup. We'll take that ship down now." Carter, Ulrich, and the rest of the crew moved swiftly, preparing the weapons for one final strike. The Garkath soldiers positioned themselves, ready for the inevitable battle that would determine the fate of their world. As the Vraxis warship drew closer, Alina's mind raced. The swarm had been broken, but the leader, the source of their strength, still remained. If they could destroy the command ship, the Vraxis would be left without guidance, and the rest of their forces would fall apart. It was their only chance to ensure lasting peace. "All hands, brace for impact," Alina ordered, her voice calm but filled with steely resolve. "We're taking this fight to the heart of the Vraxis." The dauntless Horizon surged forward, its weapons locking onto the enemy ship. A barrage of energy blasts erupted from the human ship's cannons, slamming into the Vraxis command ship's shields. The enemy ship retaliated with a powerful blast of its own, shaking the dauntless Horizon and sending sparks flying from the control panels. "Damage report," Elena barked. "We've lost 2 thrusters," Carter replied quickly, his face set with determination. "But we're still moving forward. Just a little longer, Captain." With a final, determined push, the dauntless Horizon locked onto the Vraxis warship. Elena's hands gripped the controls like never before, guiding the ship closer to the enemy. The crew's final assault was swift, the ship's weapons tearing through the Vraxis defenses. The warship's shields began to flicker, weakened by the concentrated fire from both the humans and Garketh forces. "Now," Elena shouted. In one final devastating blow, the dauntless Horizon's main cannon fired directly into the heart of the Vraxis command ship. The explosion was immense, lighting up the nebula with the brilliance of 1,000 stars. For a moment, it seemed like time stood still. Then the debris of the warship drifted into the void, and the swarm scattered like insects with no queen to lead them. It was over. The Vraxis had been defeated. But as Elena looked around at the exhausted faces of her crew and the battered Garkath soldiers, she knew that the victory had come at a cost. Many had given their lives to reach this point, and their sacrifice would never be forgotten. Elena's gaze met Alric's, and for the first time, they shared a look of understanding. 2 different species, united by a common goal. They had won, but the road ahead would require rebuilding, healing, and remembering what they had fought for. "Let's go home," Elena said quietly. The dauntless Horizon drifted slowly through the quiet void, its engines humming faintly as it made its way back to the Garkath homeworld. The battle was over. The Vraxis had been defeated. Yet, despite the relief, Elena felt an unsettling silence inside her. The war had taken its toll, and she knew it would take time to heal, not just for the Garkath, but for everyone who had fought alongside them. The crew gathered in the mess hall, exhausted but alive. They had won, but the price of that victory was heavy. The room was filled with quiet conversations as they shared stories of the battle and what lay ahead. Elena looked around at the faces of her crew, human and Garkath alike, knowing that they had all just experienced something that would change them forever. Alric stood at the front of the room, his tall frame casting a shadow over the others. His usually calm demeanor was filled with a quiet gratitude, a recognition of the sacrifices made by his people and by the humans. The Garkath had never been a species to openly show emotion, but Elena could see the shift in their hearts. They had fought together, built together, and survived together. It was a bond forged in the flames of war, one that would not be easily broken. "I want to thank you all," Alric said, his voice strong but carrying the hint of weariness. "The Vraxis are gone, but our work is far from finished. Our world is scared, our people are wounded, but we will rebuild, together as allies, as friends." The room was silent for a moment before a low murmur of agreement spread among the crew. They knew what the Garkath had lost, and they understood that the road ahead would be long and difficult. But they had also seen the strength in each other, humans and Garkath. 2 species who had once viewed each other with uncertainty and fear now stood united. Elena stood and walked to the front of the room, her gaze meeting Alric's. "We're not going anywhere," she said, her voice steady and filled with conviction. "Humanity will stand with you. We'll help you rebuild. We'll help you heal. The fight is over, but the real work is just beginning." Carter, standing by the bar, raised his glass in a silent toast. The rest of the crew followed, the clink of glasses filling the room. There was no celebration, just a quiet recognition of the victory they had earned and the journey they had all shared. As the crew continued to talk and share their stories, Alina stepped out onto the bridge. The view of the stars outside seemed so peaceful now, almost surreal after the chaos they had just faced. She looked out into the vastness of space, reflecting on everything that had happened. The human race had always known war and conflict, but this had been different. This had been a fight for survival, for something bigger than just one species. The dauntless horizon sensors lit up with the familiar signature of the Garkav homeworld. It was in sight. The planet, once under siege, now stood quiet, its surface scared but hopeful. Alina felt a sense of peace settle over her as the ship began its descent toward the planet's surface. They had done it. They had saved the Garkav. But more than that, they had proven something to the galaxy. That humanity, with its will to survive, its resourcefulness, and its unshakable belief in the power of unity, could stand against any enemy. The battle was over, but a new beginning had already begun. She turned away from the viewport and spoke into the comms, her voice carrying a sense of finality. "Prepare for landing. It's time to go home."